The Florida Panthers survive a trap game in a Monday matinee at FLA Live Arena, going down by 2 goals and end up winning in overtime over the Anaheim Ducks. Alex Baumgartner is back to discuss this big win and a surviving win for the Florida Panthers.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Monday, February 20th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Don't forget to also send in your screenshot of your subscription to the Locked On Florida Panthers YouTube channel and your 5-star rating on whichever podcast app you listen to Locked On Panthers for your chance to win 2 free tickets to the Florida Panthers versus Chicago Blackhawks game on March 10th. Best of luck, everybody. So the Cats, they first game back from their 4-game road trip. Of course, we discussed the 2-2-0 road trip with Alex Slunt from Full Press Hockey. It's always difficult for a team to come back to set the tone. That first game when you return in a place that you're very comfortable in. Panthers go down by 2 and they come back and we're even trailed again 3-2 and then score 2 unanswered, send it to overtime and get a win and get a game winner in overtime by Carter Verhaeghe and survive a trap game. And this will be a great time to bring in my guest on the show. It's another Alex. It's Alex Baumgartner from 5 Reasons Sports Network. Alex, welcome back to Locked On Panthers.
Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming back here on the show, discussing this 4-3 win for the Florida Panthers over the Anaheim Ducks, where, just coming into this game, I mean, Alex Slump and I spoke about it yesterday, how if the Florida Panthers had lost this game, especially in regulation, how honestly, I would have felt that I would have felt that this could have been a funeral type of podcast today, based on, especially, of course, beating the Anaheim Ducks earlier in the season, getting 48 shots with back in November, which the Florida Panthers got 55 shots today on Monday afternoon. But you would think that with it being a 1 p.m. puck drop, that it would be the Ducks that would be off to the slow start, but no, it was quite the opposite. Even though the Florida Panthers were dominating the possession early, it was just some silly mistakes for the Panthers, especially on the goaltending end, where we couldn't blame. I didn't want to blame Bobrovsky on the last game for the goals given up, but what'd you think of the first 2 goals for the Panthers? Because I thought Bob was a little slow to get going in those on those first 2 goals.
The first goal, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, that's the McTavish one.
Yes, it was on the rebound.
At least from what I saw, was it looked like Bob made the initial save, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happened was it looked like Mark Staal wasn't marking his side of the goal. So when he slid over, the first shot already went off, but he slid so much that McTavish had the clear look at the rebound. And when a guy is that open alone in front of the net, especially if the goalie does make the initial save, there has to be someone to at least get a stick on the puck, and that's not what happened. The second goal, I mean, power play, wide open net. There's not much you can really do there.
Yeah, and for it's funny for this game, for the Panthers and the Ducks, it was 2 former Panthers who got on the scoreboard for the Ducks. Petrano was the one who got it off the power play, where it bounced on the M boards. Bobrovsky commits a little to his left, and then that's when Frank Petrano got it into the open net. And for the Panthers, I mean, I thought in the first, even prior to the goals by the Ducks, they were great at pinching on their pinches, pinning them towards the boards, creating the turnovers as well. But there's a lot of misconnections as well. I mean, there was a sequence where Ekblad breaks his stick in the neutral zone, and then on that very same sequence, Sam Reinhart tries a one-timer, and then breaks his stick as well. So but also I think the Florida Panthers did very well in realizing that John Gibson was giving up quite a few juicy rebounds. How do you see the adjustments that the Panthers made to keep attacking?
Sometimes stats can definitely be deceiving. So when you see a team out shooting someone by 30 plus almost or something around that, you could say it was pure domination. I did think the Panthers for the third period, it was besides that one mishap where they gave up the go ahead goal, it was pretty much domination. The shots were like 22 to something, 22 to 3, 24 something in Panthers' favor. It was very high. I think Florida let Anaheim get a couple good breaks. I think it might have been in the second period. Anaheim had a couple good looks and consecutive shifts off the rush in transition, where while the Panthers really couldn't generate anything through the neutral zone, and they had to keep dumping and chasing and getting the pucks in deep. The pinches were like so for me. There was a couple times where your guys got burnt, and it led to odd man rushes the other way. Luckily, it didn't turn out to too much for the Ducks. But the Panthers really flipped the switch, I think, towards the end of the second period, because I also noticed that it seemed like they were trying to get more traffic and pucks towards John Gibson, because even though he will get a lot of saves, he does give up a lot of rebounds, and the pucks were sitting in and around the crease. And as you look at the first couple Panthers goals, it was all kind of like that. The Eric Staal tip gets a stick on it, then banks off a skate and goes in. There was the Lomberg tip. There was a play where Luostarinen was right in front of the net. It didn't account to a goal, but once again, getting the puck towards the goal, winning the net front battle, and then getting the tip onto the net. That's kind of how you have to win hockey games. So the Panthers did adjust towards the back end of that second period. Now, 4-on-3 power play, you really have to try and score there. And then obviously one puck hits the crossbar. But, after that power play went 0-4 on the 4-on-3 and then the 5-on-4, and the Ducks came back, it looked like the Panthers didn't really, it looked like the Panthers were going to lose that one. So they were lucky to get that tying goal, and due in large part to how good that third line was, Lomberg-Cousins and Eric Staal. If it wasn't for them, they wouldn't have won that game. They each had 4 shots on goal. They averaged 15 or around 15 minutes of total ice time, which is pretty good for the third line. I mean, that third line really brought all the momentum for the Panthers in the game.
Yeah, and at 5-on-5 together, 10 minutes and 58 seconds, and then shots for when they were on the ice versus shot against 17-2. And George Richards tweeted saying that every single time he looked at the blue paint, Eric Staal was there. And to think that also the Panthers got a goal called back, which was the correct call for goalie interference, where Mahura just couldn't stop his momentum enough to push Gibson out of the net. But still, and also the times that the Panthers have gone a little bit on rushes and have hesitated to shoot as well. There are even times where even before Mark Staal got his goal that I was in my head, I was thinking shoot. But
that was happening a lot in the first period. They were getting a little too cute with the passes, and then Anaheim got 2 quick ones, and then all of a sudden you're like, now it's 2-0. You guys had a lot of chances, but sometimes one overpass or a missed puck, and now they're going the other way.
Yeah, and that one of them included the Matthew Tkachuk trying to between the legs against John Gibson, which completely missed the net.
I think he had a little bit more space than initially thought, so I think he could have pulled it back to the forehand. But Tkachuk is pretty good at least getting the puck with that between the leg shot, so it's worth a try, I guess.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And the Panthers, they made their adjustments, and we spoke about how the Panthers we're not misconnecting on passes towards the latter part of the game like they were in the beginning, but the Panthers they still found a way to come out with this 4-3 overtime win over the Anaheim Ducks. We're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss more about what the players said after today's matinee matchup between the Florida Panthers and the Anaheim Ducks. But first, we're going to tell you all about Athletic Greens. And I started taking AG1 because sometimes I have a little bit too much coffee, and sometimes I need a little bit of a break from that as well. Of course, being in South Florida currently, I did make a little visit to Vicky's Bakery, but after I return from South Florida, I'm going to take a little bit of a break from the coffee and go back to my Athletic Greens. And I started taking that because I need a little bit of a break from the coffee. So what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. With special blend of ingredients support your gut health, nervous system, your immune system, energy, recovery, focus, and aging. All the things. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition with just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Segment number 2 here on this Monday, February 20th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, where the Florida Panthers defeat the Anaheim Ducks by a final score of 4-3 in a President's Day matinee matchup against Anaheim. And Alex, it's a little crazy. We spoke about, of course, the Eric Staal scoring, and then Mark Staal on the rush. We haven't seen too much of that, but just also a very clean chip from Eetu Luostarinen, who also got the chip for the game winner to Carter Verhaeghe. Now we can call Carter Verhaeghe a 30-goal scorer. But Mark Staal now 2 goals in the last 3 games, a big one against the Washington Capitals, and then Mark Staal getting the tying goal when it was 2-2 at 17:23 in the second period. And also, like I said in the first segment, we've seen Mark Staal being a little more aggressive on the rush. How are you feeling? How are you feeling about the Staal brothers after everything that was said to them about them, especially from the fan base in the first few months of the season?
Eric's kind of rejuvenated his career a little bit. Obviously, he didn't play in the NHL last year, play in the Olympics for Team Canada, had a little quick stint in the AHL, I believe.
For Iowa.
Yeah, and that was basically Olympic tune-up for him. But no, after not scoring until, what was it, December, he's pretty much been on a tear. He's been very consistent in that role. And the Panthers have missed their top 3 centers decently frequently in the last few months. Sam Bennett once again doesn't play, so Eric Staal not playing 4th line minutes, but he looked good on that 3rd line once again. I think that's 4 goals in his last 8, would have been 5 if that other one didn't get disallowed. But he's a type of player that has been around the block, and he's won championships, he's won gold medals. He knows there's a very good chance with that triple goal club and the Stanley Cup, there is a good chance he will make it to the Hall of Fame when it all is said and done. I think he will get a good couple looks at that. He plays the game in the areas where you need to win. As you said, they tweeted that he was around the crease every single time. That's how you win. You win closer games. And even though the Panthers outshot Anaheim by almost 30, this was a close game where they needed overtime to win it. And a lot of these goals came from right in front of the net with him and with Eric Staal and Ryan Lomberg. I want to go back to Eetu Luostarinen, playing 2nd line center today because Sam Bennett once again is out. Had 2 points, was a +1, 11 for 20 in the face-off circle with a 55% face-off percentage, just under 20 minutes of total ice time, got a little bit of power play and shorthanded time too. The jump he has taken in his game this season from being buried on the fourth line last year to getting that third line winger spot to now jumping up onto the second line center spot when Sam Bennett's not there. He really is kind of like a Swiss Army knife, or kind of like a utility guy where you can throw him wherever you need him in the lineup in the top 9 and he's going to get a shift done. And that's exactly what happened. As you said, made a nice chip to Carter Verhaeghe, who is now a 30-goal scorer for the first time in his career. And I also believe 30 goals should keep Carter Verhaeghe in around the top 15 in goals in the NHL this season. That is a team high as well. So congratulations to Carter Verhaeghe on that.
Yeah, and I mentioned this quite a few times of Dale Talon's last trade deadline as general manager for the Panthers, which he was here once again in the Panthers press box, as he always is for every Panthers home game. And let's also talk about how the Panthers really had to. We're also just banged up in the middle of this game. I mean, Giovanni Smith takes a puck to the face, which and he doesn't return. Paul Maurice said he got x-rays, came out negative, that he'll also be reevaluated tomorrow. Carter Verhaeghe takes a puck in the neutral zone as well, struggles to get off the ice, and then doesn't miss much time in this one as well, and getting that game winner like we spoke about too. So it's just about I feel like we've talked mostly about this with like Forsling and Barkov, especially when it came to just taking pucks, going down, and then coming right back up. But this time it was Carter Verhaeghe being able to come back and get that goal. Walk us through how, and Eric Staal as well. He also went out for a few minutes. Just talk about about the Panthers, and just, even though they were banged up going into this, about how they were able to just put that to the side, and of course with adrenaline going, how they were able to still fight through.
Well, at this point in the season, everyone is losing, guys. You just see the Islanders lose one of their top 3 scorers, Matt Barzal, indefinitely in the middle of in a push for a playoff spot. Florida hasn't had Sam Reinhart. They, dropped Giovanni Smith, who only had about 3. It was, I think it was 329 of total on ice time after he took a puck to the face. But, this is a game where you're playing the worst team in the NHL. You're down 2-0 at home. So, yes, I think the second half of that game was more on brand for how it should have been, where the Panthers are completely dominating the game. They, after going down 2-0, they came back with a 3-1. I mean, that's what you should do against the bottom ranked team in the NHL when you're fighting for a playoff spot. You're now technically in a wild card spot for the time being. They're going to drop out of that probably tomorrow, if not tonight, just because of the games in hand. But you needed this game because the next 5 is not easy. You got Buffalo, you have Tampa, you have Nashville, you have Pittsburgh, and you have Vegas. So you're playing all but Nashville. Those are teams that are either in a playoff spot or are right around you for a playoff spot. This was an extremely important game that they needed to win, and on paper they should have won. So it's a good thing the Panthers were able to get this one, because even though they've taken out Buffalo twice this year, that's going to be a huge 4-point swing in their next matchup. And it's better to be up there with at least one extra game for the win than losing to Anaheim and Nashville back-to-back. And now you're kind of fighting for your playoff hopes against Buffalo, who's been hot. So this was a very much-needed win for the Panthers.
Mm-hmm. And by the time the Panthers do play the Buffalo Sabres, they'll make up 2 of those games in hand. And by the time they play Tampa on Tuesday, they'll make up 3 of those games in hand. So a lot of rest, 3 days off in between. So big week, whether on days that the Panthers do play and on the days that they don't they're not on the ice. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to discuss more about the Panthers wild card, where, like Alex teased, and we're going to discuss more about the teams around the Panthers as well in that race. We're going to discuss this more on this Monday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about FanDuel Sportsbook. And we're at the midway point of the NBA season, and it's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bet if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and easy to use. And you can bet on everything from the money line, point scores, to threes drained. Plus, FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a chance to at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Third and final segment here on this Monday, February 20th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, where the Florida Panthers are celebrating a 4-3 overtime win over the Anaheim Ducks. So, Alex, I asked Paul Maurice this after the game about how this is the third time now since January 28th that the Florida Panthers have won a game when trailing after the first period. Of course, we were speaking about it for months, how they had none prior to that Boston game. And even before I asked Paul Maurice that question, he spoke about how that Boston game was so ingrained in his brain about coming back last minute and all. And I asked him, what is the mindset for Panthers going to the locker about their confidence to come out of the intermission to come back? And he says that he spoke about how this team, when coming back 4-1, you're not going to do this against the grade the top tier teams in the NHL, but getting within striking distance about how important that is. And the Panthers, I mean, you could even see it in their goal differential. They're -1 right now. So not blowing teams out all the time, but not always getting blown out. I mean, I know we've seen that a little bit recently in St. Louis and Nashville, but they're always within striking distance, which I guess I know people have picked on Paul Maurice's system with playoff hockey and all, but how do you see what Paul Maurice said after the game about being in striking distance when it's crunch time?
I just think that month of January is extremely important to the team's confidence and their playoff hopes. When we talked to the players after the All-Star break, they all were kind of reflecting on how important that Boston one was, just for the confidence in beating the top team in the NHL, being able to go into the extended break, with such a great comeback win. Having Alex Lyon in there for such a long period of those wins. The month of January was huge for the Florida Panthers just in terms of confidence. Now, not everything is pretty, as you could see with the St. Louis game. Now, I think that game was more of playing part of one of the worst schedules in the NHL on a back-to-back. But the Nashville game, I don't have anything to say with that. It's not like the legs were gone. It's not like they were playing a back-to-back. It's just they didn't come out to play that game. But I think that the Panthers understand the situation they're in, and they obviously know they should be a better team than the standings show this season, and they just haven't played up to that, especially the beginning of the season. So the last 6-something weeks, they've kind of been turning their game around a little bit in terms of just getting comeback wins, because the comeback Cats from last year, they weren't winning any games coming from behind until recently. So that's a big jump in their game, just being able to score goals in the third period too. Their third period goal differential, going back to around the middle of January, even when they started picking up wins, was still a terrible deficit. It was really bad. And you slowly start to see that now they are putting more goals and they are playing more 60-minute hockey games than they were earlier in the season. But it's nothing too excited to get on just yet. We'll have to see how the next 5 games go, because that's when you're really playing against playoff teams. And if they can keep the performances like we saw against Washington, or that game where they beat Tampa a couple of weeks ago, if they can do that against these teams coming up, and you get 4 out of these 5 wins, especially in these 4-point swings, and you're making up the games in hand, then it's a whole new ball game with about 15 games left in the season.
Yeah, and you mentioned the third period goal differential. It's still at -19 as the Panthers in the third period today were even. So even though Hockey Reference hasn't
And then the
updated it,
Nashville game certainly didn't help that.
yeah. So it the Panthers were starting to get their third period goals, and then the Nashville game just definitely put that out of whack.
Actually, I lie. That's only 1 goal differential in the Nashville game.
Oh, so so we spoke prior to recording about the Barkov, Lindell, Reinhart line. There's a few, I believe there was a shift or two where Tkachuk got on that top line to kind of create a little bit of a spark, but then they went back to Lindell, Barkov, and Reinhart. And right now that line has plateaued. Sasha Barkov for me was not that noticeable today for in this game. There, of course, can sometimes be streaky up and down as well, but I know Bennett is scheduled to hopefully come back on Friday, maybe even Anthony Duclair. Do you see a possibility in those in that top line being broken up immediately?
Well, I don't know about immediately because it's not like they just plateaued this game. It hasn't been the greatest. Like Lundell did get some of his confidence back playing on that line on the wing, and just kind of getting more comfortable with his game over the last month or a month and a half. He's played on the first line wing, but I think if Duclair is back on Friday, you got to throw him up there with Barkov, and Carter Verhaeghe can really score with whoever is on his line. Sam Bennett and Matthew Tkachuk have been electric together. So if Bennett is back, it's a good luxury if you have Bennett back because he can play with Tkachuk at a pretty good level. But Tkachuk can also go up on the first line. I do think the offense has been kind of stagnant with that line, so it wouldn't be a bad idea at all if you break up 16, 15, and 13 and you throw, maybe you can throw Verhaeghe on the top line and drop Reinhart down, see what that does. Or, if Duke comes back on Friday, you throw Duke on the first line and you drop one of Lundell or Reinhart down to the second or third with Eetu if Bennett's back too. Then, I mean, here's the thing. If you have a healthy Bennett and you have a healthy Duclair back, that's going to open it up where you can drop Eetu down and you can play him third line center, or you can play him on the wing and you can drop one of Reinhart or Lundell down in the lineup. So now you're kind of loading up a third line, even though the third line tonight was electric. So, I'm not the coach, but I do think you should take a look at breaking up that first line, whether it's one or two of the guys.
Yeah, and you mentioned how the third line was dominant as well. Usually, that most times that's the Panthers' fourth line as well, and how much that could change with the Panthers if that goes back to being a fourth line.
Yeah, like Denisenko only played 4. I don't think Denisenko touched the ice in the third period. He only played 4:10 the whole game. So, and Colin White's been in and out of the lineup. Giovanni Smith, if you have to scratch him, you scratch him. So it's like if you need to drop that third line down to the fourth line, that's not really a problem. It's if you have everyone back healthy, you're gonna prioritize a Duclair and a Bennett.
Yeah, absolutely, and honestly, this will only benefit the Panthers as a collective once those guys do return back. I do believe that it'll be Denisenko as far as being sent down.
It just makes sense. He doesn't have to clear waivers.
Yeah, and
that's why Denisenko's been going down frequently this season.
Yeah, so. But I do want to see him get his opportunities, but that would mean and I was thinking early in the week maybe Colin White goes on waivers because of how in and out of the lineup he's been to keep Denisenko on the team. But it's just I right now it's just like for Denisenko, he's just not finishing his chances as well.
At this point in the season, if Colin White hasn't seen waivers yet, unless there's something coming at a trade deadline where you need a clear cap, I don't think there's a great chance you will see Colin White on waivers if they don't have to make a cap move. Just because you're so close to the deadline and you're so close to potentially the playoffs where there isn't a salary cap. At this point in the season, I don't think you'd see him go down. You would drop Denisenko down. You can always call him back up.
Yeah, and the opportunity will again for Denisenko as well. So for Colin White, you get to keep him in the lineup for Paul Maurice's squad as well, and you don't lose a body, that's for sure. So a lot of rest for the Florida Panthers, though they're off tomorrow. So looks like that they'll be back on Wednesday. They have a lot of rest. There'll be a lot of game action between the teams chasing the Panthers in the next few days, which will just be sitting back, relaxing, and just watching some hockey that's not the Florida Panthers, and just seeing how this wild card race is going to shape in the next few days as the Panthers prepare for the Sabres, which we'll have plenty of time the rest of the week to talk about that matchup on Friday. But Alex, I want to thank you so much once again for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, a post-game edition of the show. Let everybody know where they can find you online.
Yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter down below at Baumgartner91, and yeah.
Of course, follow him there, where every single or at least most Panther games, he will have his 5 takeaway articles from 5 Reasons Sports Network. So make sure to give him a follow there. So Alex, thank you once again, and I will see you next time, my friend. And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure to listen to today's episode of Locked On Sports Today. Peter Bukowski gives you a 20-minute or less podcast on the entirety of the sports scene with exclusive interviews and the take of the day. Follow Locked On Sports Today on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. I'm Armando Velez with Alex Baumgartner, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.